want to?
Fix it. Fix it.
No, I fix it.
Okay, you are welcome to today's lecture on health, safety, and environment, HSE. And today we'll be drawing the curtain on this course, health, safety, and environment. We'll continue with the topic, environment safety. Environment safety. Now, what is environment safety? Environment safety or environmental safety is simply a natural surrounding of an organism. Environment, let's take the terms, let's define the terms one after the other before we can define environment safety. Let's look at environment. What is environment? Environment is simply our surroundings, a surrounding, natural surrounding of an organism, in which directly or indirectly influences the growth and development of such organisms. Now, when we talk about safety, of course, we have defined safety in the course or the beginning of this course. Safety is simply a precautionary measure taken to safeguard one from hazards in the workplace. Now, when we now look at environmental safety, is simply how one or a worker can be secured or safe from environmental hazards. That is what we'll be dealing on today. We'll proceed by looking at environmental resources. Environmental resources. When we talk about environmental resources, we are talking about just like when we have the natural resources. Environmental resources are those resources at our immediate environment. Those natural resources, natural environmental resources. Natural environmental resources. Examples is the air, the atmosphere. The air atmosphere. Of course, is a resources, but it's environmental, not natural now. It's environmental resources. Air atmosphere is number one. And then number two is soil mineral. Number three is animal. Of course, an animal is also a resources around our environment. And as such, is a typical example of environmental resources. And the next environmental resources is the plant. Of course, the plants, we have them at our immediate environment. The plants that we see on our environment is an example of environmental resources. Another environmental resources is water. And then lastly, we can't talk about environmental resources without mentioning the human. Yes, we can't talk about environmental resources without mentioning the human being. Of course, all these environmental resources have their own role to play. They have their role to play. We can't do without soil. Without soil, farming will be difficult. And at the same time, animals are needed in the as an environmental resources. When we talk about water, we can't do without water in the environment. And also, we human beings are also part of the environmental resources. And now, when one of these is lacking, or two or more of them are lacking, it makes the environmental resources incomplete. Because directly or indirectly, one depends on another. We'll proceed by looking at environmental hazard. Environmental hazard. Environmental hazard is simply hazards or event that happens that has the potential of causing harm within the environment. Environmental hazard. It refers to a situation or an event that has the potential of causing harm within the environment. Example is emission to air. Those toxic emissions discharged into air is an example of environmental hazards. When you look at some industries, the emissions produced in the course of their production, they affect the environment and thereby causing environmental hazards. In which those emissions, when inhaled, in large quantity can pose health challenges. Another example of environmental hazard is the release of harmful substances to water. Release of harmful substances to water is another example of environmental hazard. That is the discharge into waterways. Another example of environmental hazard is the contamination of land. When the land is being contaminated, for example, using the oil spill, when the oil is being spilled on the soil, it becomes an example of environmental hazard. Another example of environmental hazard is overgrazing. Overgrazing is another example of environmental hazard. Another example of environmental hazard is the deforestation. Deforestation, that is cutting down of trees without replacement. Then bush burning is another example of environmental hazard. Of course, in the course of burning a bush, the smokes emitted or the smokes discharged into the atmosphere is causing environmental hazard. And as such, bush burning becomes a means of environmental hazard, or it contributes to environmental hazard. Then we have the oil spillage as another example of environmental hazard, and so many others. So all these we have mentioned are examples of environmental hazards. We'll look at environmental pollution as next. Environmental pollution. What is environmental pollution? Environmental pollution is the release of any substance into the environment in such quantity or level that is detrimental or harmful to the environment. I'll take that again. Environmental pollution is simply the release of any substance into the environment in such quantity or level that is detrimental or that can cause harm to the environment. That is environmental pollution. Types of pollution. What are the different types of this pollution? Number one is air pollution. Air pollution. That is a pollution that affects the atmosphere. The air pollution. And number two is water pollution. That is a pollution affecting the water bodies or waterways. And then the last type of pollution is what we call the soil pollution. The soil pollution. That is the pollution affecting the soil. We'll look at sources of environmental pollution. What are the sources of this environmental pollution? Of course, we have mentioned some of them earlier on, but we'll also look at more in detail. Sources of environmental pollution. Number one, for the air pollution, the sources include release of combustible gases. When combustible gases are being released or discharged into the atmosphere, it causes air pollution. Another example, or rather another source of air pollution is the particulate matters, what we call the dust or the asbestos. They are all source of air pollution. Another one is fugitive emissions. And then lastly is bush burning. All these enlisted terms are all sources of air pollution. We'll look at the sources of water pollution. What are the sources of water pollution? Number one is oil spillage or oil leakage. Oil leakage, chemical leakage, or chemical spill oil leakage or chemical spill is a source of water pollution. When the oil or chemicals are discharged into water bodies, it pollutes the water and thereby makes the water unfit for consumption. And in most cases, even the aquatic lives are also affected. So oil leakage or chemical spill is a source of water pollution. Another source of water pollution is the washing, maintenance or washing. When we talk about maintenance or washing, most fishermen at the end of fishing using some items, or let me use the word chemicals, to wash off their equipment, and thereby these items being washed are being discharged into waterways, thereby affecting or polluting the water bodies. Some maintenance work being done near waterways also affects or serves as source of water pollution, because in the course of this maintenance, oils are being spilled into the water bodies, among other things, or chemicals and the rest, in the course of maintenance, thereby causing water pollution. Another source of water pollution is the chemical used for fishing. Chemicals used for fishing. Most fishermen make use of chemicals to help them capture a lot of fishes, and thereby causing pollution to the water. Another source of water pollution is the sewage discharge into water. When we talk about sewage, I talk about liquid waste. Discharge of sewage into water bodies is another source of water pollution. And then lastly, another source of water pollution is the indiscriminate discharge of waste into waters. When waste are being discharged into waters, it affects the water, it contaminates the water. It's a source of water pollution. And as such, one should desist from discharging waste into water bodies. In most localities, you find people during rainfall, you find them throwing in their waste into water channels. And then what happens at last is that they don't consider what happens. The water channels takes the waste and channels them straight into the waters, and then dump them into the water, thereby affecting the water and causing water pollution. We'll look at the source of soil pollution. Sources of soil pollution. One source of soil pollution is the oil spillage. Oil spillage can be a source of water pollution. It can also be a source of soil pollution, because oil contaminates land and at the same time contaminates water bodies. So oil spillage or chemicals is an example of soil pollution. So we look at the consequences of this environmental pollution. What are the consequences of environmental pollution? One of the consequences of polluting the air or air pollution, the consequence of air pollution, number one is the health problems. Health problems. When people inhale these polluted air or gases or toxic materials or substances that have been discharged into the air, and when people inhale such a substance in large quantity, it can affect or cause some health challenges. Take for example the smoke from automobiles. When inhaled, can cause health problems. Another consequence of air pollution is the ozone layer depletion. It affects the ozone layer. Another effect or consequences of air pollution is what we call global warming. Global warming, what is also known as greenhouse effect. And if you have been following the environmental awareness campaign recently, you will discover that there has been a lot of awareness campaign regarding ozone layer depletion and also global warming. That is the greenhouse effect. So many NGOs, so many health bodies have been going on an awareness campaign just to ensure that people are aware and also sensitized of the effect or the consequences of air pollution, which can trigger global warming. Another consequence of air pollution is contamination of surface. The last consequence of environmental pollution is the global warming, just like I said earlier, or what we call the greenhouse effect. We also have other consequences when in regard to water bodies. Consequences to water bodies, or consequences of water pollution, if you choose to put it that way. Number one is contamination of underground water. Contamination of underground water or the surface water. When the water bodies are being polluted, it will go a long way in contaminating the surface and at the same time, in most cases, also the underground water. Another consequence is the destruction of aquatic lives. Those aquatic lives, fishes, the rest of them, those aquatic animals are also affected when water pollution occurs. And another consequence of water pollution is flooding and erosion. Flooding and erosion. Most of the floods that some parts of the country or some countries are experiencing in time past and also in recent times is as a result of water pollution. And in some cases, the discharge into water bodies. When those sewage waste are being discharged into water bodies in large quantities, before you know it, the water will overflow its bank, and then the next thing you see is floods. And other consequences of environmental pollution, other consequences regarding the environment is deforestation. Deforestation. This occurs as a result of excessive cutting down of trees or cutting down of trees without replacement. And then another consequence on the environment is the reduction or relocation and extinction. It causes relocation and extinction. Some of the environmental animals are being forced to relocate, and in some cases, some are forced into extinction. They cease to exist. Another consequence of pollution to the environment is loss of biodiversity. The loss of biodiversity. We'll be looking at waste. Waste as a subtopic. Waste. What is waste? Waste is anything which is no longer of use to the disposer. When we talk about waste, they have different types of waste. We have liquid waste, we have solid waste, we also have gaseous waste, among others. So when we talk about waste, waste is simply anything which is of no longer of use to the disposer. The disposer simply means the owner. As such, we'll call it waste. So it is unavoidable material resulting from an activity which has no immediate economic demand and which must also be disposed of. Now, at this point, it's very important to note that waste should be disposed properly. Whether it's liquid waste, solid waste, or any kind of waste, they should be disposed properly. So why do we manage waste? Why do we need to manage waste? Remember, managing waste has to do with properly disposing of the waste as well. When you manage waste, those that need to be disposed should be disposed. Those that need should be recycled and put into use. So why do we need to manage waste? To start with, waste is managed to minimize potential to cause harm. We manage waste to minimize potential to cause harm. Take note of that. We manage waste to minimize potential of the waste to cause harm to human and also to the environment. Waste is being managed so that we can minimize its potential to cause harm to human and also to environment. That is to people and also the environment. Especially when we talk about those hazardous waste, those toxic waste, they have to be handled with care and disposed properly. We have different types of waste, as I mentioned earlier. Number one is gaseous waste. The gaseous waste includes gas flaring, particulate dust, waste gases from stack, cement factories, asbestos dust, acid fumes, and cigarette fumes. All these are called gaseous waste. Most people don't know that the cigarette fumes, those cement factories, what they produce from cement factories, and the particulate dust, they all comprise of gaseous waste. Number two type of waste is the liquid waste. When we talk about liquid waste, those are waste produced from industries and also from homes and offices. Examples are the waste from domestic homes, the liquid waste produced from washing of items, clothes, might be plates, might be dishes. They all comprise of liquid waste, and that is categorized under domestic waste. Take note of that. It's categorized under domestic waste. That is domestic liquid waste. Now we have the acid waste, which is still under liquid waste. Those liquid waste produced are acidious. Those liquid acidious waste are classified under acid waste. We also have the waste from workshops, talking about the oil and the rest of them. From the workshops, from mechanical workshops, they are all liquid waste. That is those oils that are no longer of use. They can be categorized under liquid waste. Another type of waste is the solid waste. When we talk about solid waste, we are talking about the broken items, broken bricks, refuse, sludge, broken glasses, bottles, plastics, name them, paper. They all comprise of liquid. They are all examples of solid waste. They are all examples of solid waste. I'll take them again, one after the other. The broken bottles, the plastics, paper, bags, pure water bags, sachet materials. They are all examples of solid waste. Those wastes you can touch, you can feel them, you can hold them in your hand. They are solid waste. Now we'll look at the classification of waste. How do we classify this waste? We have looked at the types, the examples, and now we'll look at the classification of waste. Waste can be classified into domestic municipal waste, industrial waste, and then hazardous waste. Waste can be classified into three. Waste is classified into three. Number one is domestic waste, or what we call domestic municipal waste. Number two is industrial waste. Number three is hazardous waste. Please take note of this, that types of waste, they have three types of waste, just like we have waste classification. The three types of waste are solid waste, liquid waste, and gaseous waste. And then the classification of waste is classified into three. Number one is domestic municipal waste. That is the waste generated from homes residential homes or offices, they are classified under domestic municipal waste. We also have the industrial waste. These are wastes produced or generated from industries. And then lastly, we have the hazardous waste. These are wastes that requires extremely carefulness in disposing them. Take note of this, that hazardous waste should not be discharged or disposed anyhow. They have to be disposed properly. The reason for that is that when hazardous waste are not properly disposed, it will cause health effect to those within that location or within that locality. It will affect them health-wise. And as such, as a matter of fact, some hazardous waste are required to be buried deep down below the earth surface. You have to dig the ground and bury them properly. Why? To avoid health challenges. As a matter of fact, when such hazardous waste are being discharged on the surface of the soil, it will cause a serious health problems to those around. So hazardous waste should be handled and disposed with care. So these are the three classifications of waste. We look at waste life cycle. The waste life cycle. Just like we have the life cycle of a mosquito, or take for example other insects. Just to make reference, we also have what we call the waste life cycle. The waste life cycle involves the following in this cycle. We have the waste generation, we have the waste handling, the waste storage, waste transport, waste treatment, and waste disposal. Now, waste generation simply means generating of the waste. The source of the waste being generated, where the waste is generated, where the waste is being generated. Then waste handling, how those wastes are being handled, packaging, putting them properly in their waste bins. Those that are hazardous waste should be put in hazardous waste bin. Those that are domestic waste should be put in the domestic waste bin. That is where we talk about waste handling. Then we'll have the waste storage, where you store those wastes. It's not too far from the waste handling. And has to do with how you separate them. And then the waste storage has to do with where you store them. And then the waste transport, how those wastes are being conveyed. Take note of this, that in waste transportation, waste should be transported properly. In some occasions, some persons or some waste management companies or organizations transport waste by dumping them directly into the truck, and that is very wrong. Waste should be packaged in a waste bag or in a waste bin and then kept inside the truck, and then until you went to the disposal area or location, and then it will be emptied there. But some waste management organizations, they empty the waste directly into the truck, and as a result of that, in the place of conveying the waste on the road, you see some of the waste will be dropping on the road. The air will be taking some away because they are not properly transported. So waste has to be packaged in such a way that it can be transported without leaving some of them on the road, or some of them flying above to land on persons or on some vehicles plying the route or such road. We also have the waste treatment. After the waste transportation, the waste is being transported to where they are being treated. We'll transfer the waste to where they are being treated, and then finally the waste gets to the disposal arena. I will take it again for us to understand the life cycle or the waste life cycle. Waste is being generated, and then when it's generated, it should be handled, separated according to the classification of waste. And then once that is done, it should be stored where it's supposed to be stored. Those of hazardous waste should be stored in hazardous waste area. Those of domestic waste should be stored in domestic waste container. After that is done, the waste should now be transported to the place where they will be treated for those that needs to be treated before the disposal. Those that have been transported and then to the disposal, sorry, to the treatment location. And then from the treatment location, they are being transported to the disposal location. That is all about waste life cycle. Now, some of the ways by which waste can be discharged, can be discharged includes the following. We have the open dump. That's the one you see people going to dump refuse on the surface or on the surface of the soil. We call that surface discharge or open dump. So one of the means of discharging or disposing waste is what we call the surface discharge or the open dump. That one is very common in this part of the country. Then we have the ocean dump. The ocean dump is a disposal of waste in waterways, in oceans. Then we have the reinjection, when waste are being reinjected. Then we have the biotreatment, those that undergo biological treatment before they are being disposed. We also have the thermal treatment, those involving heat, or that needs to be heated before disposal. We also have the solidification, compressed into solid. That is solidification, that is compressed into solid. We also have the landfill. What is landfill? Landfill simply involves, landfill discharge simply means a discharge of waste whereby the ground is being dug. They dig the ground and then dump the waste and then cover it. I made mention of this earlier on. This particular discharge of waste is mostly used for hazardous waste. Those wastes that are hazardous require that they use what we call landfill disposal. And landfill simply means you dig a ground, put the waste down inside, and then cover the ground. That is all about landfill discharge. And remember, in discharging a waste using landfill, you don't just go to any land and then dig a ground and put the waste there and then cover it. No, it's wrong. A particular area, there's a particular allocation marked out for discharging or disposal of those hazardous wastes. So when you go to that particular location, that particular land, you now dig. When you dig, you put the hazardous waste, you dump them inside and then cover it. And remember, there's a particular meter you are supposed to dig the landfill. You are supposed to dig the ground before you can put the waste. The reason being that once it's dug, for example, that 500 meter below, it should be up to 500 meter below the earth. When you dig the ground 500 meter, then put the hazardous waste and then cover it. The reason for that is that the emission, no matter how the hazardous waste is being emitted, it cannot come up to that level to come and affect people in that surroundings because it's very deep below the earth. So landfill is simply an area of land mapped out for disposing hazardous waste, whereby one has to come and then dig the ground and then bury the waste, so to say, bury the waste and then cover it. I think that's the easiest word to use for a better understanding. We're looking at another topic called ergonomics. Ergonomics. And I think this will be the last topic for today, if I'm not mistaken. But at this point, I need to say this. If you have any question, please make use of the comment section, and then a feedback will be given you at the end of the lecture. So we're looking at the next topic, which is ergonomics. Now, what is ergonomics? Ergonomics is simply the science concerned with the fit between people and their work. The fit between people and their work. What do you mean by that? Ensuring that somebody is comfortable with the work tools or the work equipment he or she is using. Take for example, the seat I'm sitting on. If I'm not comfortable with this seat, it means there's a problem with the ergonomics of the seat. So the seat is made in such a way that I can rest my hand, I can rest my two hands, the left and the right one. And in such case, it's a good ergonomics. So ergonomics is simply a science that ensures that the worker, the way I'm here working, lecturing, is comfortable with the tools he or she is using. So ensuring that this seat, I'm comfortable using this seat, that the seat is not too down, is not too high for me to use. That is what ergonomics is all about. So it ensures that the worker is comfortable with the tool he or she is using to work. Just like I gave an example with the seat I'm sitting on. So ergonomics aims to make sure that the task, the equipment, the information, and the environment suit each worker. It makes sure that the equipment, the tools, the information, not just equipment and tools, information at the person's disposal is also adequate for the person to use. When you don't understand the information given to you, it means there's a problem with the ergonomics. Or when the information is not adequate enough, there's no clarity in it, there's a problem with such ergonomics. Likewise, the environment at which the person is working or the worker is carrying out his task should be favorable for the worker. And if it's the opposite of it, it means there's a problem with such ergonomics. So ergonomics deals with the tools, it deals with the equipment, it deals with the information, it deals with the environment of each worker. So what do we consider in this ergonomics? We need to consider the job being done and the demands on the worker. We consider the job being done and the demands on the worker. The job I'm doing now is the job of lecturing. And as such, the tools I'm using, the seat I'm using, should be comfortable enough for me to rest my hand. So these are the areas one need to look at when considering ergonomics. Likewise, the information used. We consider the information used. Questions we should ask in ergonomics is, how is this information being presented? How is this information to be assessed by the end users or by the listeners, just like we are doing now? Those on the receiving end of the information. How can they assess this information? How can information be changed to improve on the ergonomics? The physical environment should also be considered in ergonomics. Talking about the temperature, the humidity, and the rest of them. The lighting, the noise. In a situation whereby we are presenting this noise, you are to give an information, or you are to work or carry out a task, and then there is high rate of noise. It means there is a problem with such ergonomics regarding the environment. And then lastly is the social environment, such as teamwork and supportive management. So these are areas to be considered in ergonomics to ensure that the tools suit each worker. Remember, none of these should be ignored when considering ergonomics. If any aspect of it is being ignored, it will affect the effectiveness of such ergonomics, the effectiveness of such tools, equipment, and the likes. So ergonomics consider all the physical aspects of a person, such as the body size, the shape, the fitness and the strength, the posture, that is the way the person is positioned, the position of the person's body at work. The body posture should not be too, it shouldn't be in a way that it will affect the person. Either the person is bending down for a very long time, it means there's a problem with such posture. And the person is standing for a long time, there's a problem with the posture. So ergonomics ensures that a person is comfortable walking in terms of the posture of the body. That's why in a work area or in a work environment, the seat is being made in such a way that the person or the worker will be comfortable while carrying out his or her task. The fitness and also the strength should be considered. Likewise, the body size. Some people are slim, some are huge, so to say. Some are fat, if you can use that word. So when producing the equipment or the tools you have to use, you consider the shape or the size of the body size and shape of such a person. For example, in the case of the seat, when someone is very slim and then the seat is very, when someone is fat, when someone is fat and then the seat is very small, you discover that the person cannot sit effectively in that seat. The person will struggle to sit on that seat because it's too compacted. So you consider the person's body size when producing such tools or when giving out the tools to a worker. We mentioned the posture. You also consider the body posture in such cases. The senses should also be considered. The senses, especially vision, the hearing, and the touch. There are also other aspects of a person to be considered, apart from the posture, the body shape, the body size. We also have other aspects that we need to consider. The other aspect of a person that needs to be considered is the mental abilities. When you give somebody a task to carry out that is above the person's mentality, you look at somebody's mental health before issuing a task to the person. You consider somebody's mental capabilities, the mental health of a person before issuing a task to the person. So when issuing a task to someone, you should ask yourself, what is the mental capability of such a person? What is the mental health of this person? To ensure that the economics is being considered. We also look at the personality of such a person. And likewise, the knowledge and experience. Is this person knowledgeable or experienced in such task? That's why most times when you go for an assignment or an interview of a job, a task, you'll be required to, first thing you will be asked is, are you knowledgeable in such a task, in such job? Do you have experience in such job? Of course, if you're looking for a job, you have to have a job experience. That's where economics comes in. You want to consider that you be sure that you are fit enough to carry out such tasks that will be given to you. So how do we apply economics, or where do we apply economics? Where can economics be applied? Number one, economics can be applied in the workplace. Economics can be applied in the workplace. Why do we need to apply economics in the workplace? To reduce the potential of accidents. What are the importance of economics? One, it reduces the potential for accidents. It reduces the potential for injury and ill health. That it reduces the potential for someone or a worker to obtain injury in the course of his work or in the course of discharging his or her duty. Economics improves performance. Economics improves performance and productivity. It improves the performance of a worker and also ensures that the worker is being productive in his or her place of assignment. When a worker is not productive, of course, the employer will not have any need for such a worker. So economics can also reduce the likelihood of an accident. When they consider the posture, the body size, among others, of a worker in the course of economics, of course, the worker will enjoy such particular work and be able to carry out his or her task effectively, and thereby reducing the likelihood of accident. So the chances of such a worker being involved in an accident is being reduced to as low as minimal, as low as it's being reduced to the barest minimum. So economics can also reduce the potential for ill health and work. It can reduce the potential for ill health, that is health challenges. in the place of work. So ergonomics is typically known for solving physical problems. Ergonomics is known for solving physical problems. For example, ensuring that work surfaces are high enough to allow adequate clearance for workers' legs. That's why when you see some seats or workplace comfort seats, you see them having a rest point for the legs, and ensuring that the seat is very high but not too high, and also a place where the worker can also rest his or her legs. So ergonomics ensures that the typical aspect of solving physical problems is being met. So ergonomics also deals with psychological and social aspects of one's life and work. Ergonomics also looks at the psychological aspect, that is the mental aspect of a person, and also the social aspect. So examples of these ergonomics problems that can be found in the workplace. Some of the examples of the ergonomics problems that can be found in the workplace is the screen that is poorly positioned. When a worker is working with his or her system or the computer, and then the screen is too blunt, it means there's problem with such ergonomics. And if the screen is too high, that the worker has to stretch his or her neck to be able to look at what is on the screen, this means there is also a problem with such ergonomics. When the mouse at the same time is also placed in such a way that the worker will stretch his hand or her hand to be able to make use of the mouse, it means there is also a problem with such ergonomics. When there are no adequate breaks enough in the course of a person's work schedule, there is also a problem with the ergonomics. And of course, when there are no adequate break time for a worker, you know what the consequence will be. The worker will break down. When the load is too heavy and demands that a person should carry such a load manually, when a heavy load is to be carried manually, it means there's a problem with such ergonomics. That's why in some companies you see what we call a load lifter. Instead of manually lifting those heavy loads, which can pose some can cause injury, you see the lifter does such a task. So when a person is to carry a heavy load manually, it means there is problem with such ergonomics. So when another problem with ergonomics is the task. When a task is to be carried out, when a task is to be carried out on a slippery floor. Take for example, water has been spilled on the floor, or there is oil on the floor, and then someone is to carry out the task in that particular work environment. Of course, there's problem with the ergonomics. The water or the slippery floor needs to be dried up first, needs to be cleaned up before someone can work in such work environment. If not, there is problem with such ergonomics. And as such, all these problems we have listed may result in physical injuries, especially low back pain when there is poor body posture at workplace. Poor body posture will result to back pain. Another problem that will occur from this ergonomics fault is the injury to the arms, legs, or fingers. So the problems may be so critical, might be so demanding. In some cases, ergonomics problems can cause a huge problem for an organization, or loss for an organization when not looked into. So how do you manage the work day? How do you manage the work day? there should be sufficient recovery time between shifts. For example, if a worker is to work from 7 a.m. in the morning to 7 p.m. in the night, it means a problem with such economics. Now, how do you manage the work day or work schedule? There should be break time. There should be shift. There should be a shift in the work schedule in such a way that, okay, one person will work from 7 p.m. to 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. and then another person takes over from such shift, and then that person that works from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. will now go to rest. The person will go off, and another person starts from that 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. And by so doing, you are managing the work schedule properly to avoid breakdown or to avoid poor ergonomics. So employees working excessive overtime can also become an ergonomics problem, can become a source of a concern regarding ergonomics. Excessive overtime. Overtime should be controlled. When a worker has worked his work time period, when the work period expires and the person is to work overtime, the overtime should not be overstretched. If the person works 1 hour, 2 hours and wants to increase, there is need to stop such a worker, because he or she might endanger himself. Because of doing that, such a worker is tampering with the ergonomics, and in such a scenario, the worker can easily lose sight as a result of stress and strain, and in the course of that, the person can sustain injury, and in some cases, it can become a fatality. So there is need to control excessive overtime in the workplace, because those problems, these excessive overtime, can result to tiredness. Someone can be exhausted, and that can cause likelihood of accident. It can increase the likelihood of an accident, and can even cause ill health. So in conclusion, an understanding of ergonomics in your workplace can improve your daily work. When you understand ergonomics in your workplace, it can improve your daily work. It can improve your daily work routine. So it is possible to eliminate pain, stress at the workplace to improve job satisfaction. How can that be done? Simply by improving ergonomics. How can we remove stress in the workplace? How can stress be removed in the workplace to improve job satisfaction? It's simple. Improve on the ergonomics. Improve on the ergonomics. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of health, safety, and environment. And just like I said earlier, if you have any question, you can make use of the comment section, and then you'll be attended to. Thank you, and don't forget, this is Environment and Safety Management Institute, your #1 HSC organization in Nigeria. Thank you.